I think that in the 16 years that I was with my ex-husband, I cried in front of him maybe 5 times. And of course, that's not because I just never cried. It's because I learned very early on that he was just not a safe person to bring those kinds of emotions to. But that did not crystallize for me until one night I was having a panic attack in my room. And my default programming or my default response was to keep it contained and to just stay in my room until it was over and just never let anybody know that it had happened. But I decided to override that programming and go downstairs and tell him what was going on, mostly because he was the reason I was having a panic attack to begin with. And when I went downstairs, he was laying on the couch looking at his phone. And I walked in with tears and snot still streaming down my face, my breath still a little bit ragged because it was at the very end of this attack. And I just launched into an explanation of, I just had a panic attack, I am not doing okay, and here's why. And when I was done, he looked up from his phone, looked me in the eye, and said, okay. And then just went back to looking at his phone. And that is just one of many prime examples that I have of emotional neglect. And I know that emotional abuse is a term that we throw around a lot. And I think that's because it is usually pretty overt and obvious, and the damage is pretty obvious. But emotional neglect almost always lives side by side with its more overt counterpart in these relationships. And just because it is not as loud and in your face does not mean that it is less harmful. Because emotional neglect is that cold void of absence that you feel even when a person is physically present. It is the heavy weight of loneliness that you feel even when you're in a relationship, not because you're with someone who doesn't see you, but because you are with someone who sees you and intentionally ignores you. And while it might not be reasonable to expect our partners to be professionals at co-regulation or trauma response, it is not beyond reasonable to expect a basic level of care and compassion when we go to our partner and say, I am not okay. And one of the ways that emotional neglect causes harm is it trains a victim to believe that their bids for basic connection are too much and that their needs are not important, to the point where they just stop trying to make those bids for connection and they stop bringing up their needs or desires or emotions. And when you're in a relationship with someone who is toxic, abusive, narcissistic, controlling, that is exactly the response that they want from you.